Okay, so once upon a time, pharmacologists came up with medications for controlling psychosis, right? So antipsychotics came to the market. And in the beginning, they were typical, and they were blocking dopamine. So the first generations of these medications came into the market. They were weak antipsychotics, like medications like thioridazine. If you're not from my generation, you might never heard of it. Maybe in your pharmacology books. But if you're from my generation, you might remember some medications like trifluoprazine and thioridazine and these kind of stuff, right? Especially if you might remember thioridazine. Medications like thioridazine were weak antipsychotics. The dose was 100 milligram, 150, 200 milligram. So we needed higher milligrams. And they were typical antipsychotics, but they were weak. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, we have two major neurotransmitters. We have two major neurotransmitters in the body controlling our movement. And those two guys are dopamine and acetylcholine. Dopamine and acetylcholine. Acetylcholine in the NMJ, neuromuscular junction. Okay? Coming from the pyramidal pathways, controlling our movement. But that movement is harsh, is not melodious and harmonic enough to sing like Adele or play the piano like Yonge, for example, right? So that harsh movement needs some harmony coming from dopamine, from the extrapyramidal pathways to make it nice and harmonic. Whenever there is a balance between this acetylcholine and dopamine, we're fine. When there is imbalance, problems starting, right? Problem are starting. How? Dopamine is going low. Acetylcholine is getting the upper hand. Parkinson disease? One day, you're Muhammad Ali, the top boxer in the world, right? Fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee. One day, you can barely carry a torch in the opening ceremony of the Olympics, right? Atlanta Olympics, if you remember, 1996. So you're rigid, you're bradykinetic, and you have tremor, especially resting tremor. That's Parkinson. That's Parkinson. Or if dopamine gets the upper hand and get crazy, Huntington disease. Huntington disease. Again, dopamine is high, so you might have some psychotic features. Whenever dopamine goes high, you're crazy, fell in love, right? Or you're on cocaine or something like that. Your dopamine rises. So you might show some psychotic features, right? The same. In Huntington, dopamine goes up in comparison to the acetylcholine. There is imbalance, but this time dopamine got the upper hand. Huntington disease. So you might have some psychotic features and you're always dancing. Chorea, Huntington chorea. Del Arabi, dal raqs, always dancing. Chorea in Latin. Okay. So whenever I play with this dopamine, I will have some motor symptoms. And don't forget the fact that we started playing with dopamine because we wanted to block dopamine for controlling the symptoms of psychosis. But I weakly stop dopamine, so I will not have that much motor side effects, but I will have a lot of other side effects. Anti/S/O/S up. It's not anti-SOS, it's anti/S/O/S/. Anti for anticholinergic effects. Dry mouth, dry bladder, dry guts, dry memory. So your dementia gets worse, you will get urinary retention, you will get constipation, you will get dry mouth, your glaucoma might get worse. That's anticholinergic effects. S, seizure. You might get into seizure. O, orthostasis, because of the alpha blockade. You change your position from lying down to sitting, or from sitting to standing, and all of a sudden, you fall because of orthostasis. S, for sedation. They're highly sedative, right? So pharmacologists came up with some achievement. I blocked dopamine, but I blocked it weekly. 100 milligram, 150, 200, right? But these medications came with some side effects. Anti-SOS, anticholinergic, sedation, seizure, orthostasis. The anti-SOS side effects are high. Then they said, you know what? Let's fix it. Let's come up with some medication that we don't need 100 milligrams of it. We actually can control the patient with 2 milligram, 5 milligram. So they came up with some potent antipsychotics, potent typical, but still blocking dopamine, right? Like haloperidol, Haldol or haloperidol. But if I block dopamine potently, don't forget that I am blocking it here as well. So you will have a lot of EPS or extrapyramidal side effects. Extrapyramidal? Parkinson? Tremor, rigidity, bradykinesia? Yes, they called EPS. Or drug-induced Parkinsonism? Or drug-induced Parkinson's symptoms? EPS, extrapyramidal? Absolutely. Oh, okay. So you made it better in terms of anti-SOS side effects, but they had EPS side effects, extrapyramidal side effects. And they were typical, so they were blocking dopamine only. They were not quite successful controlling the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. Then the pharmacologist came up with a brilliant idea. They said, you know what? Let's come up with some medication with less anti-SOS side effects, less EPS side effects, and call them atypical ones. And those atypical ones were not only blocking dopamine, but also started to block some other receptors as well. So they were better in controlling the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. That's why Dr. Ahmed's question, nowadays, they're usually the first-line medications. Do we still use haloperidol, Haldol? Absolutely. But first-line medications for psychosis symptoms, right? We try to use medications like these guys that are less anti-SOS side effects, less extrapyramidal side effects, and more efficacious in controlling the symptoms of the patient. If I have a medication with better efficacy and less side effects, why not to use it? Why not to put it at the first line? Okay, so they came up with two different families of first line, actually atypical antipsychotics, two major categories of medications, pins and duns and pins and duns and pins and duns. Like Clozapine, olanzapine, quetiapine, I called it quietapine, but quetiapine. Okay. And DONs like risperidone and ziprasidone and some others. So they came up with two different families, two different categories of atypical antipsychotics, pins and DONs. Ladies and gentlemen, these pins and DONs were better in terms of side effects, less anti-SOS, less extrapyramidal symptoms, but at the same time, nothing is side effect free, right? Nothing is side effect free. So PIN's major side effect is their metabolic side effects and obesity. PIN's major side effect is metabolic side effects and obesity. like hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, that ends up with obesity, especially clozapine and olanzapine, especially close and olanzapine. All the pins, metabolic side effects and obesity, but two of them are more notorious: clozapine and olanzapine. Olanzapine makes me obese like an olanzapine makes me obese. So when you're putting me on olanzapine, periodically check my sugar, check my lipids. And the patient might complain of obesity and gaining weight. Clozapine is a fantastic medication, but it comes with some side effects as well. As a pin, it has its metabolic side effects, as you can see here, but also clozapine starts with C, and clozapine goes like a pin into your bone marrow and kills your neutrophils. 1% neutropenia. That can be dangerous. 1% neutropenia. That can be dangerous, right? That's why C for CBC, we check their CBC baseline and weekly after. In the beginning, when you're starting putting them on those medications. Or previously, Dr. Faiza, for example, said after 6 months, you might switch it to bi-weekly. But just remember that, at least in the beginning, what to do with these patients. If for any reason you put me on clozapine, C for CBC, you will check my CBC baseline and weekly after, at least for the first 6 months that you're putting me on it. After that, still, you keep your eyes on me, but maybe bi-weekly instead of weekly. Because of that 1% neutropenia, although it's a fantastic medication, but we always keep it for resistant cases. If my patient did not respond to 2 other antipsychotics, I will switch to clozapine. We never use clozapine as first line because of that risk. Okay. Mainly neutropenia, Dr. Dr. Simar, mainly neutropenia. Mainly neutropenia. And quetiapine, or I call it quietapine, has the highest quieting effects. Highest quieting effects. Okay? So highest sedating effects. Also, if I have a patient with Parkinson, oopsie, you have a patient with Parkinson? Yes. And my Parkinson patients, especially if I have severe Parkinson disease, interfering with my ADLs, activities of daily living, you have to put me on levodopa, carbidopa, levodopa, carbidopa, levodopa, carbidopa. And that levodopa can give me psychotic symptoms. So if I have a patient with Parkinson disease and having psychotic features because of levodopa, can you stop my levodopa? No, you can't, because I need to do my activities of daily living. I will try to play with your medications and see how it goes. But if I tried every single thing and still you have psychotic features, what should I do? I have to put you on an antipsychotic. Oh my God, you're giving me from one side dopamine to control my Parkinson, and from the other side you want to block my dopamine? I have to, baby. Sorry for that, but I have to. But I will try to give you something with minimal interference with your Parkinson medications and your Parkinson symptoms. That would be quietapine or quetiapine. If you have psychosis and Parkinson and you have to give a patient an antipsychotic, quetiapine is a good choice. Some of you might come back to me with pimavanserin and you say, it's an antipsychotic without any effect on dopamine. That is correct as well. But among the regular medications, regular antipsychotic medications that we use for patients, if my patient has Parkinson's disease and I have to give them antipsychotics for the psychotic features as a side effect of the medications, as a last resort, Clozapine is a good choice. Multiple times Board of Psychiatry and Board of Neurology, Iran and all around the world. Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. What about the other medications? DONS. What about Primavanserine? Dr. Anmol, it will come. No worries, it will come. Primavanserine, it will come. No worries. I will repeat everything at least 3 times. At least. Don't worry, it's your first time. That's why. I will repeat everything at least 3 times. Like Sheldon Cooper. Penny, penny, penny. I will repeat it, don't worry. DONS. DONS, guys, the major side effect of DONS is their motor side effects. The major side effect of DONS are their motor side effects. But you just told us that these guys have less extrapyramidal symptoms. Yes, but still, they have some extrapyramidal symptoms. That's why if I want to give a patient with Parkinson some antipsychotic, it's better to be a pin rather than a DON, because pins are better controlling those patients that already have EPS. Let's talk about DONS. The major side effects of DONS are their motor side effects, right? Still better than these guys, but not better than these guys. Not better than pins. Risperidone ریز میاد. بازم بهتر از اوناست. It's still better than those potent ones, but not as good as pins when it comes to EPS symptoms. Risperidone makes you rise and shine. Risperidone makes you rise and shine. It's non-sedative. It's no sedation. So if I am an antipsychotic and I'm losing job after job after job because of taking naps during my shifts and they kick me out of that job, risperidone is a better option. It makes me rise and shine with no sedation. Guys, I said pins are more notorious for their metabolic side effects, but I didn't say DONS do not have metabolic side effects. DONS might still have metabolic side effects, but their metabolic side effects are still better than pins. But especially if you give risperidone to a kid, you have to watch their weight. Why are you giving risperidone to a kid in the first place? Because risperidone is FDA approved for irregular behaviors in severe autism. Does it cure autism? No, it doesn't cure autism, but it will actually control their irregular behavior. So if I have to give a kid, especially a kid, risperidone for any reason, I will watch their weights. I will watch their weights. In Torah, we use it as well. MashaAllah, weights. Soft kitty, warm kitty. Happy ball affair. Right? So, MashaAllah, weight. Right? Weight gain in the kids. Right? I am not done. I just started the psychiatry, guys. I just started the psychiatry. You have to tolerate me for another 2 days, for another at least half a day today and tomorrow. So you have to tolerate me. Right? I cannot say everything in one sentence and say goodbye. I will miss you. So I have to take my sweet time. Aripiprazole. Aripiprazole is another medication in this category that the brand name Abilify, that they use it a lot in the emergency departments as well. Okay? So one more time, quick and fast. Antipsychotics, we have typical ones and we have atypical ones. Typical ones are blocking dopamine. They were weak ones and potent ones. Weak ones like Thioridazine, they had a high anti-SOS side effects, anticholinergic, sedation, seizure, orthostasis, and then they came up with potent ones, which has actually 2 milligram, 5 milligram haloperidol, Haldol, right, with high EPS symptoms, extrapyramidal symptoms, or Parkinson-like symptoms. They said, you know what? Let's come up with some medication with less anti-SOS side effects and less extrapyramidal side effects, and we call them atypical. That not only blocking dopamine, but also blocking other receptors as well, and they are more efficient in controlling the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. So they say, okay, I have a better medication. Why? Because it's more efficacious and less side effects. More efficient and less side effects. That's why they're the first line. And they came up with 2 major families of these medications, pins and dons and pins and dons and pins and dons. Pins' major side effects are the metabolic side effects, hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, obesity, especially 2 of them, Clozapine and olanzapine. Makes you obese like an right? So check their sugar and check the lipids and BMI periodically. About Clozapine, which is a very good medication, one of the side effects is sialorrhea as well. Clozapine can give you sialorrhea as well, to the point that when you wake up in the morning, your whole pillow might be wet. It shows that you're compliant with taking your medications. Right? Old school medicine, right? How do you monitor the patient taking the salbutamol? Tremor? How do you gauge that your colchicine dose is good enough? When the patient gets diarrhea? How do you gauge that your patient is taking Clozapine? When the pillow is wet in the morning without any sexual activity? It's sialorrhea, right? So Clozapine, right? So Clozapine is another notorious one in terms of metabolic side effects, but to start with C, reminding me that I have to check their CBC baseline and weekly, at least in the beginning, because it goes like a pin into your bone marrow, kills your neutrophils, mainly, Dr. Simar. So 1% neutropenia, 1% neutropenia, right? And that's why it's never the first line. It's never the first line. We always keep it for resistant cases. My patient is not responding to 2 other antipsychotic medications, then I will think of Clozapine. Another one, quetiapine, I call it quietapine. Why? Because it's the highest quieting effect, sedation effects. Also, it's a safe medication if my patient has psychosis and Parkinson and you have to put them on any antipsychotic. Another category of those medications are DONs, like risperidone and ziprasidone. DONs are actually, in comparison to the pins, have higher motor side effects. The good thing is that they make you rise and shine. Risperidone makes you rise and shine, so no sedation. So if you're actually, the patient is complaining, if my patient is complaining of actually gaining weight and obesity and hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, it's better to switch to DONs. If my patient is complaining of motor side effects, maybe it's better to switch to pins. Risperidone is rise and shine. I didn't say they are metabolic side effect free, especially if you give it to a kid because of irregular behavior, autism, severe autism. So if you're giving it to any kid, you have to watch your weights. Another medication in this category is aripiprazole or Abilify. Also, ziprasidone is quite notorious for its QT prolongation. We'll talk about QT prolongation later today. Okay, so that was the major things that I wanted to talk about antipsychotics.